Hello, and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field.
Hello and welcome back again to the Behavior Education Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am really excited to be joined by two really great colleagues today, Pam Sharping and Nicole Hitchcock. Hi, hello, ladies. How are you?
Hi.
Hi, doing great.
Good. Do you mind introducing yourself? And Pam, if you want to go first.
Sure. My name is Pam Sharping, and I am a BCBA-D. So I just finished up my doctoral program in 2025. So yippee.
Congratulations.
Thank
Woo.
you. And so I have lived in Kansas and practiced in Kansas since I've kind of gotten started. And my background is basically I've since I graduated with my bachelor's in applied behavior analysis, I worked at a private residential school for most of my career. And then about 2015, I left and joined the Kansas Technical Assistance System Network, or otherwise called TASN. And Nicole and I both work on the Autism Tertiary Behavior Support Team. So say that 5 times quickly. It's kind of a tongue tie. So what I do on the project is I provide statewide training and practices of behavioral principles and evidence-based practices. I also am a coach and consultant in schools across the state. And that's just a little bit about me.
I appreciate that. Nicole, do you want to share a little bit about you?
Sure, I'd love to. So I'm Nicole Hitchcock, and I too reside in Kansas. I actually grew up in Iowa, go Hawks, and I moved to Iowa after college, or I moved to Kansas, my apologies, after college. And I started my career as a special education teacher in like a life skills setting. And I taught in that position for 10 years across 3 different schools. I started at Iowa, and then I came to Kansas and taught for 10 years. And then I was a behavior specialist coach in here in Kansas for a few years. Excuse me. And then I've supported schools in Ottawa, Kansas, where I live now, K through or pre-K through 21. So I have a pretty wide range of students that I've supported. I've personally worked in a residential school like Pam has. Now I think this is my 8th year working for TASN. So I do the same stuff that Pam does. Just we're on different training initiatives, and we share one of them. But there's I don't gosh, Pam, is there like 10 trainings that we do? I don't even know. I'd have to count, but there's many trainings that we do, and we're on different ones. But yeah, so that's just a little bit about me.
Well, I appreciate you both being here today. So some exciting stuff has been going on in Kansas around school-based BCBAs. And you all had reached out to me and we've talked a little bit about the VAPSPAN, or Virginia Public Schools Behavior Analyst Network. And you all were very busy and have created CAPSPAN, the Kansas Public Schools Behavior Analyst Network. So can you tell us a little bit about what led you to feel like a network at the state level might be needed?
Sure. Back in about 2024, again, when I was deep in literature, going through my doctoral program, I stumbled across your article about creating a school-based behavior analyst network. It was around that time. And at that point, Nicole and I and some other colleagues were supervising trainees in our state. So we had some funding, and so we could support about 4 Kansas educators that were mostly special education teachers who were interested in becoming behavior analysts. We could support them through their supervision process. And we've been doing this now for at least 5 years. And after our trainees leave our supervision, there's this little bit of a hole or a gap where you're just like, oh my gosh, we spent 2 years together building these relationships, and
Right.
there's needs that come up during supervision, such as, we have an outside consultant coming in the school, and we really are not sure what roles each of us should take when they come into the school. So there was all these questions, and again, that gap of just losing that ongoing relationship that we just were like, we really should create a bridge from supervision to just supporting each other long term. Because in Kansas, we know about 40 school-based behavior analysts, and how we know that is because we get the special funding when you are working in schools, and so we know that of about 40 behavior analysts. So we know that there's a need for, a collaborative learning community that we wanted to put together. So that was just kind of why we generated a school-based behavior analyst network. So from 2024, Nicole and I hosted our very first networking event in August, and we set up monthly meetings and events where we were offering continuing education credits for those types of events. And we have been able to cover topics just ranging from, school-wide positive behavior supports with students with severe disabilities to, this year we did a 2-part session on sexuality and ABA. We've done some supervision events on impacting goals through coaching and behavioral skills training and beyond. So we've been able to do ethics, supervision, and some learning opportunities. In addition to, we do have some work groups that we try to get people interested in. And we have a professional development work group where we're constantly looking for new speakers. And some of our members have stepped up to do events, as well as we are developing a new work group that Nicole will talk about, getting that SBT and PFA starting to go into our state more. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing currently.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think one of the things that I know we've talked about in the past that we have experienced here in Virginia is we have school districts that have, we are fortunate to have some school districts that have a lot of BCBAs that work for them, but we have many, many school districts that have 1, maybe 2 that work for them. And it's really hard to have that professional community when there just aren't a lot of you that you know. School-based behavior analysts have kind of a unique role, and it's hard to be kind of the only one doing what you're doing. And I imagine in Kansas, when you say, you have about 40 or so people that you have in your network, that is probably the reality for many of them, is that they're 1, 2, maybe 3, if they're lucky. Do you find that to be the case?
Yes, I think, in our more urban, populated areas, you will have more behavior analysts and, concentrated in the Kansas City area. We have a few more in Wichita, but when you hit Western Kansas, your rural communities, there may be 1 or 2 out in those areas. So we've opened the doors to even behavior analysts that might be kind of in a clinical role, but really support and are working with kids in the school setting, because in Western Kansas, that's the reality. They're capturing a very wide net and having to do a lot of traveling. And so if they are interested in participating and learning how to function within the role of a school-based behavior analyst, our doors are open.
That's great.
Yeah, we could. I know a couple of our BCBAs that are in our network that they're called cooperatives here in Kansas, and they can support up to 10 agencies. Like one BCBA has 10 agencies. So yeah, they and there's no other person in their co-op that has their same role. So
So let's talk a little bit about that project that Nicole is working on with the SBT and PFA.
yeah. So, currently, a group of us TAS and BCBAs are getting mentorship from the Nebraska ASD network, which is very similar to the TASN network. And so we are working with them to get mentorship on the Greg Hanley SBT process. And so if you don't know what that is, PFA stands for Practical Functional Assessment, and then SBT stands for Skills-Based Treatment. And it's just a very structured process to support those kids that are in crisis, such as self-injurious behavior. A lot of the students that, well, yeah, a lot of the students that I would really recommend this process for would be that are in like a one-on-one setting, that are no longer in their classroom, and they're with another adult or an adult one-on-one. So, due to their aggressive behavior. So we are working with one district in Kansas, in the Kansas City area, actually, and they have, gosh, I don't probably six or seven. I didn't do that on purpose. Six or seven agencies, or I'm sorry,
You spend too much
BCBA.
time with children.
I know.
In schools.
Yeah. Um, they have lots of ECBAs in their agency, but they have a very large district. So we are working with them to implement this process with three of their students. They have two preschoolers and one 18 to 21 student. And we're seeing really great steady progress with improving outcomes for these students. And not just in their classrooms, but in the gen ed setting, as well as in the home and the community. Their parents are, um, yeah, my skin just gets the goosebumps just thinking about this one kiddo that his progress. His parents were able to have people over for Easter, and they haven't been able to have people in their home for years.
That's
So.
awesome.
Yeah. So our next step is to support a small group of BCBAs from the Capspan network with gaining this training through FTF, which is Greg Hanley's website, FTF Behavioral Consulting. And they provide some great training, and we are going to fund that training for these people that are chosen for this cohort. And then we'll give them some in the moment coaching and collaboration in order to prove those outcomes for their students. So each team will get to choose one student. And then each BCBA will implement with our idea is like a teacher, a special ed teacher or a para. So we're going to really support them with gaining their skills to be able to implement this process and then build their capacity to do it on their own.
I think that sounds like a great project for your network. And I'm sure that the people that are part of it are really appreciative because those kind of opportunities are harder to obtain when like I said, when you're kind of the only one out there. And how do I make some of this stuff happen? So I want to back up just a little bit and talk about, so you all provide technical assistance and training throughout your state as part of TAS, and that was your role before Capspan existed. With Capspan, you're kind of doing that with BCBAs that work in schools, but a lot of the times I get the question like, how did you get this started? Like, how did you make this work? And so, can you all talk a little bit about within your existing structure, how did you get Capspan going?
Sure. Um, well, we're fortunate again to have that TASN Autism and Tertiary Behavior Support platform. So this TASN has been around, gosh, for over 30 some years. And so our longstanding um, our longstanding initiative has helped in be able to create that solid foundation. So through TASN, we have
And Pam, just to back up for 1 second, and TASN is supported by your Kansas Department of Education, right?
Yes, but we're also, our funding comes through OSEP. Is that right? Correct?
Yeah, the
Okay.
Office of Special Ed Programs. Yep.
So yes, we are kind of an umbrella underneath KSDE, the Kansas um, Department of Education. So yes,
And I only bring that up because that means that you kind of have a connection with your Department of Education already established,
yes,
Oh, yeah.
which I think is really, I think that's been a critical step for any of, it's not the only way to go about it, but I've seen that be a critical step for us in Virginia, and I've seen it be a critical step for you all in Kansas as well.
right, correct. So it is again, the TASN project has, gosh, over probably 18 different projects. So
Sure.
multi-tier system support, co-teaching, deaf and blind, and autism is just one little sliver of those projects, right? So we are supported under that. So that makes it really nice. So we have, a website, we have social media pages, etc. And through our own TASN project, we were able to become ACE providers so that when Kansas educators are attending some of our trainings that definitely have that behavioral foundation, we're able to offer those CEU opportunities. So having that, just the network in place gave us the leverage to be able to create this collaborative learning opportunity for our school-based behavior analysts in our state. So
And I think what's really important is you all didn't suddenly have a onslaught of funding for this. You kind of carved it out within your positions that already exist.
correct, correct. So our director was definitely supportive of this practice, and so we didn't have a budget in year one. We were able to secure a small budget in year two. And instead of spending that money on one speaker, that's where the idea was to, let's see if we can invest in our behavior analysts, our members, a little deeper, and give them the opportunity, if they have the support and team structure available, to do so, but be able to get this additional training where they don't have to worry about getting the funding from their own district. And then the ongoing cohort is a 13-week kind of a support group where they're meeting weekly and looking at data, and there's in the ear coaching, and there's just a lot of collaboration on even the data analysis piece. And so that is a huge support that we can provide to our school teams and through this particular network. So
For sure. So you all mentioned that you have, the project that you have going on, you provide CEs monthly, and then you mentioned work groups. What do your work groups look like?
well, they're hit and miss, and
They're a work in progress. I get
so I think,
it.
what we did, Nicole and I, is, we studied your article very closely. And
Very.
so we really try to replicate on a smaller scale, how does this fit within the state of Kansas? So, and I think we have found that just because we create a resource or work group name doesn't mean that everybody's going to be interested in participating in
Sure.
that. So I think there's just been um, some shifting in those work groups, and so maybe our resource building work group may not have a lot of time and interest to be able to do that outside of networking events. So we embed those into the networking events at this point. I think the SBT PFA group cohort is going to be a work group in itself that's going to be strong and supported because it's a weekly process.
Right.
And we're going to be able to use the information, some of the video, the data gathered with parental consent and team consent to be able to share those out at future capspan events. So really showcase all the hard work that they're doing. Um, Again, we have another work group on kind of that professional development, just like what are the topics? What do you want to hit on? And so we're using our evaluations from our events and surveys to kind of guide future professional development opportunities. But we're in year 2, so we also realize that we're learning a lot. Educators are busy. School-based behavior analysts are busy, and this is carving out one more thing out of their schedule to do for the network. And so, it's just a learning curve, and we're flexible and we're trying to balance it all. So that's kind of where we're at with some of our work groups.
We also have a, a work group. It's kind of stagnant at this point, but on RBT supervision and resources. And I'm the lead of that one. And we were really gung-ho in the beginning to they created like a Google folder of all the different competencies for RBT for the RBT competency assessment, and then they were adding different supervision resources for each of those competencies, so that could just be, a working folder for all the BCBAs in the network. We got a few in there, but it kind of died down after a while. But
Well, and I think you bring up some important points. I mean, one, not every work group is going to work the same, right? And it depends on, kind of the outcome and the intention and the length of time and the commitment, all the things that go along with it. And I know we found that too. At this point, we have some work groups that are really well established and they've been, going really strong, and we have great momentum. We have some that only come together for a short time. They accomplish their purpose and then they don't need to exist anymore. And that's okay. And to your point, you're right. School-based behavior analysts are super busy. Um, and I find that they often really do value the work of the network because it benefits them. And I think your point about, asking them and taking surveys and, truly reading and taking in the information from your evaluations and then honoring that in what you put back out is what I think really does, in my experience, make it their network that works for them, that supports them. Rome wasn't built in a day by any means. So the fact that you're in year 2 and you've got all this stuff going on, I think that's great. I think that you all have made amazing strides, especially given the first year, there was no funding. You definitely had, we've talked about this. You've definitely had support, but there wasn't like, hey, here's a bunch of resources and everything to go make this work. You guys have had to kind of figure this out within the confines of your existing structures.
Yeah. And I think our long-term goal, we are trying to develop some professional guidelines for school-based behavior analysts in our state, kind of similar to some of the guidelines that Connecticut and in your state have put together. But I think, we're at a different pace than some other states that have had these networks going for longer. So we're just breaking things down into smaller chunks, task analyzing. That's very behavior analytic. But we are developing some resources to disseminate to our school teams and our administrators. And so I'm, pretty proud of the work that the materials that we're developing so far. So we've developed a resource on, or an informational brief, I should say, on, what is ABA and what is a school-based BCBA? And then what are some considerations for hiring a BCBA in schools? And we're currently working on another informational brief on the misconceptions of ABA. So we're taking the professional guidelines that other states have put together and starting to put these informational briefs together to let people know about BCBAs in schools and what we do, and really try to, again, show our value within a school team. What are we capable of? And answer some of those questions about misconceptions that people may have about BCBAs working in schools. And what are those behavioral principles of applied behavior analysis and, in itself. It's, how can we narrate a positive uh, outlook on those practices. So
Yeah, and I think that's really important because a lot of times I do think our school-based BCBAs have to spend time talking about a lot of those pieces, right? Like what is ABA? What is a BCBA? What makes someone qualified to do this, right? And so having some of those resources available, I'm sure are really helpful for your folks.
Yeah, it kind of gives a common language across the state too.
Yeah, I love that. And we've talked about this. We have some of those similar resources because they're not hard to develop, but they're really nice to have. They're really nice to kind of have on the back burner. And it's not just, well, Selena says this. It's, no, my state network says this. And it carries, I think, a little more weight for our folks in schools to be able to have those conversations.
Definitely.
So now that you're in year 2 and you've learned all the things there are to learn, what would you say to someone who's like, I really want to start this in my state? Like, what are some of the lessons learned that you've had that you wish you knew?
I would just say to be patient. I mean, we only have 40 baby BCBAs, so not that they're babies, but it's like compared to you guys, you have what, 200 and some?
About 250, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. So we're a very small portion. And so I always just kind of get discouraged, like, gosh, I just wish we were further along, or I wish we had more participants, or, things like that. So just be patient with the process. And it's not going to happen overnight. I have to remind myself of that.
I think when people show up, they show up and they're ready to work and they're ready to participate. And there's a lot of value. So, in that, maybe 7 or 8 people, but if everybody's there for the same cause and you're generating something that is going to help your job, your role, your, kind of position, your reputation within the school, whatever, then it's time well spent. So I don't think I've ever had hosted an event where I was like, well, that was a waste of time. It was just um it's a readiness and also being able to figure out like when is the best time to be hosting these events. And so even though our surveys say this date at this time, we're not pulling the numbers that we're hoping. So we're just going to try year 3 a little differently and start changing up dates and times. And we're going to capture some people that weren't able to come to original events. So I agree with Nicole, just being patient and honoring the people that are able to attend and because we are generating permanent products that can't be disseminated. We are doing good work. And so we'll take time.
So that actually leads me into my next question, which is what's ahead for Capspan?
Definitely the PFA SBT cohort group is on the horizon. So that's kind of what we were thinking for that question. But we're also working with the State Department, and they set up some guidelines for BCBAs contracted and working in schools. So we're supporting our Kansas Commissioner actually of Education sent out a memorandum to all the districts with some guidelines on how to navigate requests for ABA therapy in school settings, and making sure that it's legally compliant and student-centered manner. So we're supporting teams with doing that, but definitely our next step is the PFA SBT process.
And I think through that, the state guidance, that's what's helping to navigate the next resources to being developed to help school administrators make an educated decision of should we hire a BCBA within our school? Is it appropriate? Or what should we consider if we are going to contract a third party BCBA? Just putting together some information so that they can take a proactive step when working with behavior analysts, whether it be within the team or from outside the team.
Yeah, I love that. I think you all are doing such really great work. And I know that, it makes me smile when you're like, oh, we only have 40 people, but that's 40 people that are getting supported by the work that you're doing, who are not receiving that support just 2 years ago. I really appreciate that you spent some time with us today. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you, Selena, for your work that you've done. I mean, we're called Capspan because of VAPSpan, so we
Well, you're
just
very kind, but
we
you
just
all have
really
done an
appreciate
incredible
the
amount of
work.
work.
Well, we just another kind of tip for other people. I mean, just the research has already been done, and just kind of replicating that is really helped us get our foot off the ground. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, keep generating additional research articles for us to read and try to generalize some of the practices into our own state. So I know you just recently published another article. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've had a couple of them come out. There was a grounded theory study around BCBA roles, and then what about using qualitative methods in ABA, which is, I know people are gasping right now that that's like oh my goodness, but just, different ways of looking at things because not every question has the same method to get to the answer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sure.
Well,
So
if you want to send those our way, we would be happy to read
I
those.
would be happy to do that. But I really appreciate you both. I appreciate your time spending some time with us today and just kind of explaining some of the work that's going on. And I hope this really inspires our listeners that, there's lots of different ways to find your network. And sometimes you have to create that network for yourself. And so being creative and being a little flexible and being patient and how that kind of falls out, I think are all really important tips. So Pam, Nicole, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And to our listeners, we will see you on our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.